Hey YouTube, this is Steve from Average Joe's Fantasy Football, and we've got your start and sit videos for your wide receiver position. This is going to be, again, full PPR, half PPR. If it is standard, we might make some adjustments there. Again, hit some of the comments. We'll be able to help answer those questions for you. Hopefully you guys have already checked out our start and sit videos for the running back and quarterback position to help get you guys ready for that. We will obviously be talking about receivers in this aspect. There are going to be obvious receivers. There are going to be sleepers. And again, there's a game Thursday night. We have a game in London at 9:30 Eastern time, obviously 6:30 Western time for you folks. So make sure you guys are prepared for that. And of course, your regular Sunday games and Monday night games. So again, there's a lot going on this weekend. There's going to be a lot of great games. So these are your obvious wide receivers that I believe should be starting this week, no matter the matchups, just because they're getting the targets. Some may have actually really good matchups. And again, these are guys you should be playing. If you guys do have questions, again, hit us up in the comments down below. Now, the first receiver I do like as a good start this week is going to be Gabe Davis against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, of course, you're going to have Stephon Diggs as a good start. I like Gabe Davis a lot. The Ravens are allowing the league worst 56.1 points to wide receivers right now and allowing over 280 receiving yards. Okay, that's not including the running backs that are getting the ball as well. 280 receiving yards just to receivers alone. Last week, they allowed Devontae Parker to have over 150 receiving yards. And Davis is one of those guys who ran more routes last week than Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs was obviously dealing with cramps. It was very hot in Miami. Davis was able to play a little bit more. So this is a really good game for him to turn around. He didn't blow it up last week. Miami's defense actually is a little bit better than most had anticipated. But this is a game where I expect it to be a shootout. Lamar Jackson's going to go off. Josh Allen's going to go off. This is like the game of the week right now. Obviously, I wish they were different conferences because this could easily be a Super Bowl matchup in the future. But being there in the same conference obviously will be the AFC Conference Championship. It's a really good chance of that. So this is a good preview of that. And I like this matchup again with Gabe Davis because you have Stephon Diggs on the outside. It is going to be a shootout. He's getting all the routes that you would love for him to see. And Baltimore just unfortunately cannot stop the pass right now, so I like him a lot. Another receiver I like as a good start is going to be CeeDee Lamb. At this point, I'm almost at a point of putting him as an obvious start just because of the targets he's receiving. Last week, he received 12 targets. The weeks prior to that, he was averaging 11 targets per game. So he's obviously getting fed the ball. There were a couple drops, like obviously that big drop against the Giants where it should have been a big play for the touchdown, but he did redeem himself a little bit later to get that one-handed, which was amazing as you see in the highlights there. But they're going against the Commanders, who are allowing 49.2 points to wide receivers. They're almost allowing 2 receiving touchdowns a game. So this is a really good matchup. They also just gave up Devontae Smith over 160 yards and a touchdown. With the fact that Lamb is getting 12 targets and he's receiving over 80 yards a game, this is a really good one for CeeDee Lamb. Like I said, he's almost at an obvious point, but I still like him as a good start, not an obvious start. Now, another guy I have as a good start is going to be really Drake London. This kid is coming out of, I would say nowhere because obviously he was the first receiver drafted, but he's going against the Browns, who have given up 40 points to receivers right now. They are keeping receivers at under 190 receiving yards, but Drake is also receiving 8 targets a game and a touchdown the last 2 games. So he is absolutely the heavily favored receiver and option in this offense, where a lot of people probably thought it was going to be Kyle Pitts. Now, Pitts had a great game last week, who I mentioned was a good start. I knew that was going to be a game for him to show up. I actually didn't think Drake London was actually going to do as good as he did. But again, they're force-feeding him. He's seeing the targets. He got a touchdown. And I could see this happening again in this game. This is going to be one of those games where I think Drake London and Kyle Pitts both have a really good one. I think Mariota is actually going to have a pretty good fantasy game, especially if you're a DFS guy. You probably look at some of these Falcon players here. Now, as far as sits go, don't hate me for this, but I have Davante Adams as a sit. Now, this is going to be based off of what options you have. Now, if you're loaded at receiver, you probably have, maybe if it's a couple wide receiver ones, maybe some wide receiver twos, and you got Davante Adams there, and you're not sure if you really want to start him, don't be afraid to sit him this week. Now, obviously, if you don't have a lot of options, you're going to have to play him, but they're going against the Broncos, who have held receivers to the fewest yards and the fewest points with 23.9 points. Now, they haven't gone against great offenses. This is going to be the biggest test for the Denver Broncos, but they have Surtain, who's played phenomenal, who's obviously going to be covering Davante Adams. They've got Darby on the other side. They've got great pass rush, which will obviously put pressure on Derek Carr. And realistically, if you look at Davante Adams, he's seen a decent amount of targets, but the connection just isn't really there with him and Derek Carr. If it wasn't for the 2 touchdowns the last 2 games, he'd be averaging 5.9 points in fantasy. That's how little activity he's getting in receptions and receiving yards. So the touchdowns have been a saving grace for him, and that worries me a lot, especially in this matchup. So he's somebody, if you do have some options, you may want to consider sitting him. Another guy I'm sitting this week is going to be Rashad Bateman. I like Bateman a lot. He's done pretty well, but it's going against the Bills, who actually are a pretty decent team. Defensively, they actually do a pretty good job. They obviously lost Poyer, which is a big one. They again have kept receivers at a check, and most times they've held them to about 30.4 points as a group. They're keeping them under 150 receiving yards. And last week they just held Tyreek to 2 catches and under 40 receiving yards. Now, obviously Waddle had a good game, but the fact is, if Tre'Davious White is on Rashad Bateman, and realistically Mark Andrews is his guy, I don't like Rashad Bateman as a good start this week. Even as a flex, I'd probably be a little nervous. Another guy I'm sitting this week is going to be Terry McLaurin, who has been pretty consistent this whole season. It's going against the Dallas Cowboys, who actually have done a really good job against McLaurin. He's been pretty ineffective against them. The last year alone, he was held to 3 receptions in the 2 games that he played against the Dallas Cowboys. Just 3 receptions. Trayvon Diggs has actually done a pretty good job of him. Now, this defense is more of a zone pass defense than, say, man-to-man. So it's not like it's just going to be Trayvon Diggs covering him, but he's actually done a pretty good job at keeping McLaurin at bay. Now, McLaurin has been pretty good again, he's not scored a touchdown. He did have 100 yards receiving last year. McLaurin might be one of those guys you may have to put in the flex, maybe a wide receiver too. But again, look at your options. Hit us in the comments if you have questions. But he's somebody I don't really feel comfortable starting this week. Now, for some sleepers, I've got Brandon Cooks as a good sleeper against the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers are allowing 41.8 points to receivers. Last week alone, they allowed both Christian Kirk and Zay Jones over 60 receiving yards each. Cooks has seen an average of about 9 targets a game. So this is a game where he is going to get receptions. Chargers defense, I mean, a lot of people had expected a better defensive effort, but they're not performing as well as most had hoped. Plus, you just lost Boza, which is a big worry for them. So realistically, this is a good matchup for Brandon Cooks. Another good sleeper I have is Tyler Lockett again. I like Tyler Lockett a lot of these options. Now, going against the Detroit Lions, who have given up a lot of yards to the second receiver. Not necessarily the first receiver, which obviously would be DK Metcalf. Metcalf most likely will have Okudah covering him, who has done phenomenal and really well this season. He's actually kept Justin Jefferson in check last week. But as far as the second receiver, Thielen, Osborne last week, they actually are allowing those guys to score and get double digits for sure. So I like Lockett a lot as a sleeper this week for you guys. So those are my week 4 start, sits, and sleepers for the wide receiver position. Again, if there's other players you want to mention, hit us up in the comments. If you guys have questions, of course, of who you should start and sit, hit us up in the comments, and of course, trade questions as well. Or if you want a little more intimate, you could always follow us on the socials, Twitter and Instagram. People have been messaging us there as well. If you guys did enjoy the content, make sure you hit the subscribe button. It is greatly appreciated. And that notification bell is on. That way you guys are notified every time we drop a video just like this. And if you guys enjoy the content, make sure you hit the like button. It is greatly appreciated as well. Again, if you have not already, make sure you check out our start sits for the quarterback and running back position as well to get you guys ready. Games will be obviously Thursday night tonight. So again, we want to make sure you guys are ready. Again, I'll check you guys out next time.